preview stream for the upcoming episode of the Intelligence Assessment with Kevin Shipp. Today, Kevin and I are going to be exploring the agenda of what Kevin has defined as the dark left. This, of course, is a radical subset of left-leaning politicians and activists in the United States who seem to be willing to go to any lengths to achieve their goals. And those goals seem to be the subversion of the U.S. Constitution and the destruction of many of our rights and perhaps even the government itself. We're going to be beginning in just 30 minutes only on Patreon. Of course, the Intelligence Assessment with Kevin Shipp is one of many shows that we've taken to putting exclusively on Patreon. We want to avoid the troll-heavy environment that YouTube and some of the other channels are overrun by. So by being on Patreon, we allow our viewers the opportunity to enjoy this information without being inundated by people who maybe aren't here for the same reasons that the more serious viewers among us might be. Kevin is just preparing the presentation, and Kevin, of course, always has a really great PowerPoint to support all of the information that he shares with us. If you've been living under a rock and don't know, Kevin Shipp, of course, is a recovering CIA officer who left the CIA after he discovered a serious breach that was in every U.S. embassy around the world and basically put the secret identities of clandestine operatives at risk. When Kevin began to send this up the chain at the CIA and let his superiors know about it, much to his surprise, he was basically shut down. His information was deleted, expunged from CIA servers, and Kevin was pursued by the CIA. His house was poisoned, his family was targeted, and he's conducted an independent investigation into those matters. He details all of that in his book, From the Company of Shadows, which of course people can purchase by going to Kevin's website, fortheloveoffreedom.net. Kevin's going to be joining me at 7 o'clock only on Patreon. People can watch the latest episode of the Intelligence Assessment with Kevin Shipp by sponsoring either Crowdsource the Truth or Kevin. You can go to patreon.com/Kevin_Shipp or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Become a sponsor of one or both, and you can enjoy these Patreon-only live streams right here on Patreon. And of course, if you'd like to learn more about Kevin's experience in the CIA, you're going to want to go to fortheloveoffreedom.net. Kevin's got his book there, and you can get a signed copy of the book as well as information for decoding the segments of the book that have been redacted by the CIA. Kevin cleverly figured out a method for encoding that information so that people can get all that info directly from the book with the decoder information on the website. I do want to point out to people who are viewing on Patreon, we're not doing this simply to make money, and I get a lot of suggestions from people as far as why don't you use YouTube to put the videos onto Patreon. We've got a system that's been put together after very careful consideration, and the videos on Patreon are not supplied by YouTube specifically because we don't want Google to be able to decide what you can and cannot see. We have a different video provider, so even in the event that Google decides to kick Crowdsource the Truth off of YouTube, or perhaps if more malicious, anonymous users initiate strikes for some of the dubious reasons they have in the past, the sponsors on Patreon.com will still have access to all the live streams. They are backed up to a totally different server on a totally different service that if you're not a member of Patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, you don't get to see. So we're protecting this information. We're protecting Kevin's ability and my ability to speak freely about matters of opinion based in fact and our analysis of current events as we see them. Now, Kevin was just with me a moment ago. I'm sure he'll be back with us here before we terminate this brief preview stream. I also want to point out to our Patreon sponsors, First, let me thank you for your generosity. Couldn't continue this work without your sponsorship. Of course, we'd like to bring all of the information to everyone for free, but it's simply unfeasible. I'm not able to conduct my life for free, so if I spend all of my time making videos and traveling around the world to interview people like Ole Damagard and Judith Very Baker, I've been down south to speak to Kevin when he presented in Texas. Of course, I've been to New Zealand, I've been to London, all of these things. Even staying here in New York City or taking a train to Washington, D.C., they cannot continue without your sponsorship. And for the past 2 years, I've made Crowdsource the Truth my primary occupation. Finding the truth, however it has to be done, is what I'm dedicated to doing. So we need the sponsorship funds to be able to keep that going. And I appreciate people who say that perhaps they can't afford to sponsor the show. I apologize for that, and we're trying to keep as much information on YouTube and Periscope and Facebook and some of the others as possible. But without the Only on Patreon program, that free content would not be able to continue either. So please support the channel, and if you have a suggestion as to how I might improve something or a problem that you might be having, feel free to email me on truth@crowdsourcethetruth.org. It's pretty clear to everyone viewing that some of the negative comments that appear in these Patreon free streams that disparage me and my guests for having a Patreon channel are really coming from people who just want to shut down the whole effort that we're doing here at Crowdsource the Truth. If someone's got a special case, by all means, email me and we can discuss your needs in a private forum. If you're publicly posting a comment that's purely disparaging, this is a message for the people out there who are honest people who maybe haven't picked up on this yet. People doing that are just trying to affect your opinion. And that's the very reason why we've gone to Patreon. We don't want this troll-filled environment where so many false opinions are being injected in an effort to try to control the narrative. I also, on a slight technical note, I want to let people know that if you're attempting to view Patreon from Crowdsource the Truth, Patreon videos, do not use the Patreon app on iOS or Android. There's an incompatibility with the video server that we're using, but that's not a problem. You can still view on your phone or iPad, your Android device, whatever it may be. Just use the built-in web browser. So that's going to be Google Chrome or Safari if you're on Android or iOS. You can go right to patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. The videos will play back normally, and you're going to have access to all of the Patreon features. I have been communicating with Patreon about trying to get them to update their app to avoid this technical problem, but for the time being, we're just dealing with that little workaround. And once you get into viewing the videos on patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth through Google Chrome or Apple Safari on your phone or iPad, there should be no problem whatsoever. And certainly if anyone has any technical support issues, feel free to contact me either through the direct message system within Patreon or email me directly, truth@crowdsourcethetruth.org. I'll do everything I can to resolve your issues, and so far I think almost all of them have been able to be resolved with just an email or two. Certain people have TVs hooked up or all kinds of different unique scenarios that perhaps I'm not anticipating. I'll also do my best to interface with Patreon to overcome any problems that you might be having. So we're going to be going live only on Patreon in just about 21 minutes. So if you're not yet a sponsor of Kevin Shipp or Crowdsource the Truth, please make your way over to patreon.com/Kevin_Shipp with 2 P's, or to patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. You can sponsor one or the other or both, and you're going to get access to these exclusive live streams. Kevin's going to be sharing some insights with us relative to the agenda of the dark left and the ongoing controversy of the Brett Kavanaugh confirmation hearing. Of course, the FBI report is out today. The senators on the committee have had opportunity to review it. Chuck Grassley and his colleagues have told us that none of the witnesses have corroborated Dr. Ford's statements. So they do seem to be false allegations, at least with regard to Brett Kavanaugh. No one can say what has happened to Dr. Ford in her life, and certainly not denying that sexual assault is an extremely serious matter that needs to be handled seriously. But of course, that doesn't mean that anyone can accuse a person of that crime and automatically be believed. It is very dangerous for people to start to think that everyone has the right to be believed. That is specifically not a right granted to people by the U.S. Constitution. However, we do in the United States of America have a right to be considered innocent until proven guilty. And a lot of people have said, well, this isn't a court of law, it's a job interview, so he doesn't have that same protection. And I would reiterate that that is extremely dangerous thinking. In my view, whether it's a court of law or something else, those allegations, being criminal allegations, shouldn't even be considered until they're proven. Okay, so Kevin's ready. Let's see if we can get him on here. We're going to be going live on Patreon in just 19 minutes. So make sure you get on to patreon.com/Kevin_Shipp or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. You can sponsor either of those or both, and you're going to get exclusive access to tonight's episode of the Intelligence Assessment with Kevin Shipp, as well as all of the shows we've done. Kevin, thank you for joining me. How are you?
Hi, Jason. Apologize. We had some technical difficulties on this end, but it's good to be with you.
No need to apologize, Kevin. This is, I only make it look easy. It's quite difficult to do these remote broadcasts from all around the world, changing the location at all times. I've been prompting the audience that you're going to share with us tonight some of your insights into the agenda of a subset of left-leaning political activists and politicians that you've named the dark left. Give us a little bit of insight.
Yeah, I think it's really important because essentially that's what these hearings are all about. We have a great political discourse in America between liberalism and conservatism and moderate of both of those, and that's healthy and that's constitutional and democratic and something we all encourage. But there is a large segment that I call the dark left that are involved in the things that we're seeing coming out in this hearing. Lying, misrepresenting the facts, destroying a man's life to try to keep him from getting on the Supreme Court and changing their agenda. And just people are disgusted with what they're seeing. And I want to get into where it's coming from and why, so people are educated on the forces behind this Kavanaugh hearing and other parts of what's going on in the deep state and the swamp. So that's what we're going to be talking about this evening.
I agree with you. This is a hugely important matter, and you always prepare extremely comprehensive and informative PowerPoint presentations for us. We'll be going through the whole presentation in just about 15 minutes on Patreon, and I think people are going to be very interested to hear this, Kevin. It's really ironic that the appointment of a Supreme Court justice, the confirmation itself is testing the limits of the Constitution, totally throwing this man's rights out the window and basically presuming not only that he's guilty, but taking one step further of accusing the man of being a rapist. It's important to note that Dr. Ford, her allegations included groping, sexual assault, and no actual rape. And I'm not trying to minimize her allegations, but I just think it's important that we all look at these things in a very clear kind of a way. And you can't take someone who's punched someone and suddenly accuse them of being a murderer. So it's a very slippery slope when we start jumping to a judgment that someone is guilty when allegations have not been proven out. So I think people will be very interested to see tonight's episode, Kevin. And what we'll do now is we'll just wrap up this preview stream to give everybody a chance who's not yet sponsoring the program to get on to patreon.com/Kevin_Shipp with 2 P's or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. We'll be back with you in just 15 minutes for the intelligence assessment with Kevin Shipp, only on Patreon.
Thanks, Jason.